The female school doctor suddenly felt a sharp pain in her arm. She looked down in a panic, and saw a shocking wound on her arm. It should have been bitten by a sick student just now. At this moment, two students happened to pass by. They thought that she was practicing some unique dance steps, and immediately stopped and took unflattering photos of her. But unexpectedly, the female zombie rushed towards them at a high speed. It wasn't until his companion was bitten that the student who was taking photos realized something was wrong, and fled the scene in a hurry. But the zombie virus had already started to spread. Soon this place would turn into a living hell. And the cause of this zombie crisis turned out to be a case of school bullying. George, a biology teacher at Shashan Middle School, found that his son was being bullied by other classmates at school. It so happened that George had previously accidentally discovered that some mice would attack cats instead. After continuous research, he finally understood that a brand new special substance had appeared in these mice. After that, George extracted this substance and carried out related biological experiments, whose results were very remarkable. The infected mice had powerful abilities. They could easily bite marks on the glass, so George decided to use the substance he extracted to help his son get revenge. The effect was also very remarkable. His son, who was originally severely injured and on the verge of death, instantly became full of vitality. However, new problems also emerged. His son seemed to have lost his mind and became a bloodthirsty monster. He turned around and started attacking his father. George realized that something was wrong, and quickly smashed his son to death with the book in his hand. Then he put the body in a suitcase, and prepared to secretly transport it away. However, an accident suddenly occurred at this moment. His son, who was basically confirmed to be dead, suddenly started struggling during the transportation. Before long, he broke through the suitcase and stood up again. George knew very well that his son now was just a mindless zombie. On the other side, the white mouse that George had used in his previous experiment was seen by a student who was cleaning the school. The girl didn't realize how much harm this thing would bring at this time. She just thought it was a bit cute with its fluffy fur. Just when the girl was stroking the white mouse suddenly fell into a violent state and bit the girl. After that, the white mouse started attacking the surroundings frantically. The glass cabinet that imprisoned it showed cracks under its attack. Just then, George happened to return to the laboratory and saw this scene in front of him. He knew that the girl was also about to turn into a zombie, and immediately injected a whole dose of tranquilizer into her, then tied the girl up to prevent her from causing greater damage. However, this was obviously not a long-term solution. It didn't take long for the school teacher to notice that the girl in the class was missing. By asking the classmates, the teacher learned that the girl's last appearance was to go and clean the laboratory. So teacher Linda went to the laboratory. She asked George if he had seen that student. Naturally, there was no result. However, during this period, the infected girl showed a new mutation. Her strength increased several times, and she actually broke the ropes that tied her up. Then, with her last bit of sanity, she stumbled back to the original classroom. When Linda saw the student with blood all over her face, she quickly asked her what had happened. The student immediately said she had been kidnapped by George in the laboratory and injected with an unknown injection. She had tried her best to escape. Linda immediately arranged for students to send the girl to the infirmary to check if there were any strange symptoms. However, when taking her temperature, they found the girl's body temperature was much lower than the normal value. It was only 29 degrees. Linda guessed that this might be related to George's injection, and quickly called the emergency number. Just then, an accident occurred again. The female student suddenly started shaking continuously, and then began to attack other classmates. This caused chaos at the scene. Fortunately, the ambulance arrived in time not long after, and sent the girl to the hospital. At the same time, George, who had returned to the laboratory, was horrified to find that the girl had escaped, and quickly went out to look for her. But he was stopped by Linda, who came. The other party said that she already knew what he had done, and reported the matter to the school and the police, hoping that George could give a reasonable explanation. However, George just kept saying that the female student must be controlled immediately, otherwise, it would trigger an unpredictable disaster. Linda just thought the other party was bluffing to shirk responsibility, so she didn't take it seriously at all. Even the principal thought the same way when he learned about this, and planned to severely punish George. Just then, the police also came to the school. They arrested George on the charge of kidnapping and abusing students. At this time, the school doctor was examining the wound on her arm. She had never seen such a rude student. She was just examining the student, but she was bitten. Now the situation has worsened a bit. The school doctor planned to treat it with medicine, but for some reason, her hands started shaking uncontrollably. Then a stream of blood flowed out of her nose. The next second, the school doctor collapsed to the ground. and her body kept twitching. However, after only 2.5 seconds, she suddenly stood up again, her joints all over her body twisted at a strange angle. The classmates passing by outside saw such a miraculous scene, and chose to record it as a memory, and the school doctor seemed to be stimulated by their behavior, and immediately pounced on that student, but the student easily dodged, and the school doctor fell to the ground. The classmate continued to take unflattering photos of her for fun, and didn't realize the seriousness of the matter at all. It wasn't until the school doctor stood up again, rushed straight towards a student and then bit the student frantically. The student who was taking photos then realized that something was wrong and quickly pulled the school doctor away. The school doctor immediately shifted her target to this photographer. The person immediately turned around and ran, ignoring his fallen companion completely. Naturally, he wouldn't see that a few seconds after he left, that student also twisted his body and stood up again, pouncing on other classmates in a strange posture. This student rushed into a certain classroom and bit everyone in his sight frantically. The classroom suddenly fell into chaos. Finally, a male classmate pushed this zombie out of the window and solved the crisis. And this scene was just seen by Mary, who wanted to commit suicide on the rooftop. Originally, she still had some thoughts of committing suicide. After seeing that terrifying scene, she immediately decided to continue living. However, what everyone didn't know was that the zombie didn't die because of falling from the building. Instead, it infected more people downstairs. Not long after, a large number of zombies began to appear on the whole campus. When Laura, the female monitor, was reading a book, she was suddenly dragged away by her classmate John. Only then did she notice that she had been surrounded by zombies without realizing it. There were not a few people like Laura, so when the zombies pounced on them, they had no chance to escape at all. Laura and John ran all the way, then they hid in the school cafeteria, planning to use the terrain here to block those zombies. However, those inferior glass doors and windows couldn't play any blocking role at all. They were destroyed by the zombies in just a moment. A large number of zombies poured into the cafeteria. Everyone used all the props around them to try their best to resist the zombies' attacks. However, some people chose to hide. For example, Bob, the school bully who was overbearing on weekdays, he didn't hesitate at all and decisively got under the dining table, and in order to prevent the zombies from finding this place, he would kick out anyone who came in later. In sharp contrast to Bob, a student named Mario not only helped to repel the zombies, but also when he saw his classmate Evelyn in danger, he rushed to rescue her without hesitation. Although part of the reason was that he had been secretly in love with her. Under Mario's protection, Evelyn escaped from the cafeteria through the window. However, at this time, the outside had already been occupied by zombies. There were zombies everywhere. What's worse, a truck not far away was completely out of control and actually crashed into the teaching building. However, Mario and the other person seized the opportunity. They bypassed the group of zombies on the first floor through this truck and entered the second floor of the teaching building. Of course, the situation here was also very pessimistic. There were many zombies in the corridor. Fortunately, there was a fire extinguisher not far from the two of them. Evelyn resolutely aimed it at the group of zombies, which bought the two of them a chance to escape. The two of them successfully returned to the classroom. At this time, many classmates had already gathered here, right behind the two of them. Another classmate named Jack arrived. However, the other person's face was covered with the dry powder of the fire extinguisher. Evelyn and the other person felt a little embarrassed when they saw Jack. There was no need to think much. This must have been caused by Evelyn just now. Just then, some other classmates returned to the classroom. It was the monitor Laura and John. The two of them climbed back into the classroom through the window using a ladder. But just then, a zombie discovered the trace of the two and immediately pounced towards the ladder. If it hadn't been for John's timely action, Laura would probably have been killed by the zombie. At this time, everyone quickly used the surrounding tables and chairs to block the classroom door to prevent the zombies from rushing in. But among everyone, someone had already been bitten by a zombie, so the next second, the infected teacher began to turn into a zombie. With a strange twist, he completely lost his mind and turned around to pounce on the surrounding students. Although Jack immediately took action to stop it, a female classmate was still unfortunately bitten by the teacher. She turned into a zombie not long after. Now the classroom was no longer safe. Everyone could only quickly remove those tables and chairs and rush out of the classroom to save their lives. However, there were also zombies everywhere in the corridor. They only had a chance to survive if they fought desperately. John rushed towards those zombies to buy time for the people behind to escape. Mario and Jack also removed the nearby doors and windows and used them as shields to block the zombies. Evelyn smashed open the door lock of the adjacent classroom with the spray head of the fire hose. Everyone immediately got in, and thus they were able to get rid of the zombies temporarily. However, before they could heave a sigh of relief, an accident occurred again. It turned out that a window had already been broken, so those zombies could rush into the room through the window. Everyone quickly repelled that zombie, then they began to figure out how to escape. What's worse, they suddenly found that John, who had the highest fighting ability, was actually missing. In this way, their chance of survival would be even slimmer. However, a companion suddenly started to have a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. Obviously, he was accidentally infected by a zombie in the previous fight. A nosebleed that wouldn't stop was a precursor to turning into a zombie. In the eyes of this classmate, the whole world had been covered with a layer of red. There was an intense urge for blood in his mind. Then she collapsed to the ground and her body twitched all over. It only took a few seconds to completely turn into a zombie. She turned around and started attacking the classmates, who had just fought side by side with her. Her target happened to be Evelyn. When Mario saw his beloved in danger, he immediately grabbed a stool and rushed towards the zombie. After his random beating, he managed to save Evelyn with great difficulty. However, just when he was about to launch a fatal blow, Evelyn suddenly stopped Mario. Because the classmate who had turned into a zombie was Evelyn's best friend, she really couldn't bear to do it. However, the other party obviously didn't have such thoughts. Seeing Mario stop the attack, she pounced on Evelyn again. Mario quickly knocked the zombie out of the window. However, Evelyn actually saved that zombie again. Mario saw Evelyn's indecisiveness. He immediately made a decision for her and knocked the zombie down. Seeing her best friend fall from the building in front of her, Evelyn was immediately heartbroken. The others were discussing how to escape from the teaching building. According to the current situation, those zombies would rush into the room soon. At that time, all of them would be doomed. In this critical moment, Mario thought of the fire hose that Evelyn had used to smash the door just now, so he used a prosthetic hand to take the fire hose into the classroom along the door crack. Everyone decided to make a rope with this fire hose. In this way, they could go down to the second floor from the window. Soon everyone completed the knot of the fire hose rope. A classmate went down first to check, and Mario, in order to accompany the secretly loved Evelyn, decided to be at the end of the line. As the leading classmate was about to reach the second floor, Lily in the crowd became anxious. She wanted to climb up the fire hose immediately to escape from here, but she was stopped by Mario. Because this fire hose could only bear the weight of one person at a time, Lily blamed the classmate, who was exploring the way in front, to hurry up unhappily. At this time, the situation was critical, and everyone didn't plan to argue with her. Not long after, the classmate who was exploring the way in front finally reached the second floor. He was pleasantly surprised to find that the head teacher Linda was actually here too. In this way, it could be determined that this place was safe. The people behind heard this news and immediately climbed down through the fire hose. After most people reached the second floor through the fire hose, only Mario and Evelyn were left. Seeing that Evelyn was still in a dejected state, Mario kept comforting her.
정신 좀 차려. 여기 친구 안 죽은 사람이 어딨냐? 좋아하는 사람들이 있잖아.
Evelyn then cheered up again, and then she also left the classroom. Only Mario was left in the classroom. But just then, those zombies finally broke through the blockade and rushed into the classroom. They rushed madly towards Mario, the only survivor. In this way, Mario was knocked out of the window. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and grabbed the fire hose in time, so he didn't fall down. However, his situation was also quite bad at this time. A zombie firmly grabbed Mario's ankle, and this scene was just seen by John outside the building. He not only didn't die, but also successfully escaped from the pursuit of the zombies. Seeing his good brother in deep trouble now, John immediately took action. He firmly grasped that fire hose, and then helped Mario kick that zombie down. However, even so, the current weight far exceeded the limit that the fire hose could bear. The two of them had to find a place to stay immediately, and Lily on the second floor, after learning about this situation, actually demanded to close the window immediately, abandon Mario behind to prevent more zombies from chasing after them. Everyone present was indignant.
야, 너 청산이 들어오는 거 안 보여? 뒤로 와야 문을 닫을 거 아니야.
Seeing that someone actually dared to question her, Lily immediately launched a personal attack on him, and mocked the man's family situation. Lily's arrogance immediately aroused the anger of everyone. If it hadn't been for teacher Linda's timely stop, I'm afraid it would have led to irreparable consequences. After that, everyone began to look for a way to escape from the school. At this time, a classmate accidentally saw on the internet that the doctor who had escorted the girl to the hospital at the beginning had also been infected. Now the world outside the school had also been invaded by the zombie virus. Even if they escaped from the school, they didn't have a safe place to hide. This news made everyone's heart sink to the bottom instantly. However, there was no time for them to be disappointed now. The next second, a clear breaking sound came. It turned out that fire hose had broken the glass of the office. Mario cautiously leaned over to check the situation, but he was startled by the scene in front of him. There were actually zombies coming to the outside of the window, on the second floor along the fire hose. Mario originally planned to push that zombie down, with the mop beside him, but he found the zombie was actually entangled in the fire hose. Mario's action not only failed to push the zombie down, but also the mop was grabbed by the zombie. Harry immediately stepped forward to help, but was unfortunately grabbed by the zombie. Fortunately, the zombie only grabbed him with one hand, and couldn't completely control Harry. The two then got rid of the control of the zombie. However, the mop was also damaged during this period. Looking at the zombie that was still hanging outside the window, Mario really didn't know how to deal with it. John immediately snatched the mop stick and stabbed it into that zombie. However, such an attack alone was simply impossible to kill it, and it couldn't even drive the zombie away. Finally, Harry picked up the computer mainframe beside him and knocked that zombie flying. Everyone finally managed to get rid of the crisis, but Lily moved away from several people, or rather, away from Harry, in great horror, because his nose began to bleed, and there was also a wound on his hand. Lily was convinced that Harry had been infected by the zombie, although he kept arguing that his nose was accidentally broken just now, and the wound on his hand was scratched. When he moved the computer mainframe, Lily didn't believe his words at all. Under her instigation, some classmates also began to keep away from Harry. Some other classmates checked Harry's wound, and determined that it wasn't left by the zombie. They firmly expressed their support for Harry, and demanded that Lily apologize to him. For a while, neither side would give in. Teacher Linda put forward an idea: let Harry go to the adjacent recording studio to be isolated first. If Harry still showed no changes after a period of time, then Lily would have to apologize to him. This proposal was approved by the vast majority of people present. So Harry went to the adjacent recording studio alone. The others observed his situation through the glass. Half an hour passed, and Harry still showed no changes. Everyone demanded that Lily go in and apologize. Even Teacher Linda demanded so. Seeing such a situation, Lily didn't say much. She just silently came to the recording studio and wiped Harry's wound with her handkerchief. The people outside couldn't hear the conversation between them, but it seemed that they had made up. However, Lily was actually constantly taunting Harry with vicious words.
평소에 내가 너 무시했던 거 알지? 너 무시당할 만하잖아. 애들이 다 지 편만 들잖아. 너 같은 것 때문에 내가 궁제 몰렸잖아.
Then Lily left the recording studio. Harry, who had been taunted, rushed out of the recording studio angrily, and was about to teach Lily a lesson. His companions quickly stopped him and asked what had happened. However, before Harry could explain, Lily claimed that Harry had been infected by the zombie. Now it was the time for him to turn into a zombie, so he was going to attack her. As soon as Lily finished speaking, Harry's nosebleed, which had originally stopped, actually started flowing again, and it was a lot. Harry looked at himself in disbelief, because he suddenly found that the world in his eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of scarlet. He didn't understand when exactly he had been infected by the zombie. The only thing Harry knew was that the vast majority of people present were his good friends. He couldn't hurt them. So Harry took the initiative to say that he would stay away from everyone while he was still conscious. However, before he could go out, the zombie virus completely infected him. In the end, Harry still couldn't avoid the result of becoming an enemy of his former companions. Fortunately, Mario reacted in time and attracted Harry's attention with the whistle melody that the two used to blow often. Then he dodged to the side, making Harry, who was pouncing towards him, fly out of the window. However, this matter didn't end there. Harry's infection was really too strange. Obviously, he had been fine for more than half an hour before. He turned into a zombie not long after Lily went in. At this time, the monitor Laura suddenly remembered that Lily had secretly hidden in the corner just now. The monitor suspected that she had actually wiped the blood stained with the zombie virus with her handkerchief, and then took the opportunity to wipe it on Harry's wound, which led to his infection and turning into a zombie. Seeing Laura expose her in front of everyone, Lily suddenly became furious and claimed that everyone present was targeting her. Laura immediately said that if Lily wanted to prove her innocence, then she should take out that handkerchief and wipe the wound with it. But how could Lily agree to such a thing? Laura had already confirmed her suspicion in her heart and could no longer tolerate Lily's willful behavior.
반장이면 다야?
Seeing that no one spoke up for her, Lily had to wipe her own wound with the handkerchief, stained with zombie blood as Laura demanded. However, she knew the power of the zombie blood very well, so she didn't dare to do it for a long time. Teacher Linda thought that everyone should unite at this time. After hearing this, Lily immediately felt that she had someone to rely on, and immediately planned to continue arguing with Laura, and also kept abusing Harry. By the way, at this moment, Mario finally couldn't bear it anymore. Regardless of the obstruction of the people around him, he pushed Lily to the ground and planned to teach her a lesson. However, Lily actually said that since everyone didn't accept her, she would go out and find a shelter by herself. Then Lily really left the office and walked alone in the corridor full of zombies. Soon a large number of zombies noticed Lily and swarmed towards her location. Just at this critical moment, Teacher Linda appeared in time and saved Lily. It turned out that Teacher Linda was worried about Lily leaving alone. She asked the other students to stay in the office, and she went out to look for Lily. However, Linda was also infected by the zombie. Because of this, at the last moment, she asked Lily to hide in another room. Then she also became one of the zombie army. At the same time, George in the police station, in the face of the continuous questioning from the policeman, Charles finally told why he had kidnapped the female student. However, the other party didn't believe the so-called zombie virus at all, and thought that George was a lunatic. He even suspected that George was the one who was behind the sudden disappearance of George's son from the hospital. George didn't deny Charles's questioning. He decisively told the process of injecting the extract into his son, but he found that his son had actually lost his mind. Because of this, however, even now, George still thought that it was because his son didn't have enough willpower. If he could be stronger, he could gain the strength to avenge himself. Charles thought he was really crazy and immediately left the interrogation room, preparing to report this matter. But he found that the police station had actually been overrun by a large number of zombies. Obviously, what George said was true. At this time, George in the interrogation room heard the sound outside, and immediately came out to check. He saved Charles and told him all his research materials on the extract were stored in the computer in the school research laboratory, hoping that Charles could find the computer and solve this zombie crisis. And George had already been bitten by a zombie. He also helped Charles block those zombies and bought time for the other party to leave. However, strangely enough, after George turned into a zombie, he didn't have the brutal nature of an ordinary zombie. Perhaps this virus was really as he said. As long as one's will was strong enough, one could truly control it. In the school, since teacher Linda left, Mario and John took on the role of team leaders. They planned to reach the academic affairs office not far away, through the windows on the periphery, find their confiscated mobile phones, and then send a distress signal to the outside world. This idea was very good, but the plan was completely disrupted because of the arrival of one person. In fact, there was still a survivor named Mary in the teaching building. Her target was also the academic affairs office. However, she was very careless and was surrounded by a lot of zombies before reaching the target location. But surprisingly, after Mary was infected, she didn't completely lose her mind. So when Mario and the other person arrived at the academic affairs, Mary had already been here and was smashing the mobile phone. It turned out that for some reason, Mary had been photographed in indecent photos by Bob. The other party claimed that at 9 o'clock today, the system would automatically release these photos. That's why Mary came to the academic affairs office regardless of everything. But unfortunately, she was still one step too late. Bob's mobile phone automatically released the information. Mary was stimulated by this news, and immediately fell into a certain state of madness. Just at this time, Mario and the other person came to the academic affairs to look for their mobile phones. They were regarded by Mary as people who also wanted to see her indecent photos, so Mary launched a crazy attack on them. The two immediately threw Mary aside and each took a mobile phone. They separated and left surrounded by a large number of zombies. Mario chose to leave from the main entrance of the academic affairs. Although there were many zombies in the corridor, however, he easily dodged these mindless zombies with his excellent body skills. Finally, he hid in the principal's office. However, the next second, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. Bob, who should have been trapped in the cafeteria, not only appeared here but also kidnapped the principal. The thing had to start from a few hours ago. At that time, the cafeteria was overrun by a group of zombies. Bob hid under the table in the cafeteria and kicked out the people who came later. That person just led the zombies away, and Bob took the opportunity to break through to the outside. However, there were too many zombies, and finally he was blocked in the back kitchen. Just then, a canteen ant who was hiding invited Bob to hide with her, but unexpectedly, Bob actually dragged the ant out, then used her as a bait to lure away those zombies, and successfully broke through from the cafeteria. After that, with his powerful strength and a watermelon knife in his hand, he killed all the zombies in the teaching building along the way, and came to the principal's office to take a temporary rest. Although there were also a few zombies here before, they were no match for Bob at all, and were completely dealt with by him in a few moves. The principal, who was hiding under the table, was shocked by Bob's powerful force, so he planned to use him to escape. However, the principal seemed to forget that it was the end of the world with zombies running rampant now. His identity was useless at this time. Bob saw that the other party still wanted to use the principal's title to force him to drive for him, and immediately thought that this guy was crazy. The principal saw the student actually dared to resist his order, and then fought with Bob. He, a guy who couldn't even beat a zombie, was as expected controlled by Bob. It was just at this time that Mario happened to break into the room. Seeing this amazing scene, Mario took out his mobile phone and took a photo of this scene, preparing to post it on Moments. But how could Bob let his embarrassing things fall into the hands of others? And considering the current situation, so he killed the principal. Mario saw how cruel Bob was, and didn't dare to stay in the office any longer, so he fled immediately. By the time Bob chased out, Mario had already run far away. Bob threw out his watermelon knife and hit Mario. Fortunately, it was the back of the knife that hit him, so it didn't cause much damage to Mario. He continued to run wildly. Seeing that Mario was still alive, Bob could only continue to chase after him. Mario came to the library. A large number of zombies were gathered here. The only survivors could only hide on the bookshelves and barely survive. Mario quickly climbed onto a bookshelf. However, the survivors here thought that Mario was very likely to have been bitten by a zombie, so they immediately pushed him off the bookshelf. It was this action that actually saved Mario's life. The next second, Bob pounced over but failed to catch Mario. The angry Bob immediately threw that classmate to the zombie group below, and he himself continued to pursue and kill Mario. The two kept shuttling among the bookshelves like this. The numerous zombies in the library were attracted by the fight between them, and kept shrinking the encirclement. Finally, they forced them to stand on the only remaining bookshelf. Bob's moves were ruthless and directly aimed at Mario's vital parts. It didn't take long for Mario to be completely suppressed by Bob. He was about to become the food of the zombies. In this critical moment, Mario burst out with great strength. The intense pain instantly made Bob lose his fighting ability. Mario seized the opportunity, and immediately threw Bob off the bookshelf. He watched as the other party became the delicious meal of the zombies. Mario took the opportunity when the zombies were attracted by Bob, and quickly fled from the library. However, the corridor was still full of zombies. It didn't take long for Mario to be surrounded by a group of zombies again. He observed the surrounding environment, and found there was a narrow well pipe beside him. He immediately got into it. Due to the limitation of the terrain, only one zombie could enter at a time. Mario thought he could still deal with it. However, before he could take action, a sound of breaking through the air suddenly came. That zombie was immediately shot in the head by an arrow. It turned out to be several survivors holding compound bows. They were all elites of the school archery team, so their archery skills were very accurate. But because Mario was hiding in the well pipe, the other party didn't see his figure and thus missed him. After leaving, the members of the archery team went to the infirmary. They wanted to use the computer here to contact the outside, but for some reason, the computer lost its network connection. In fact, the whole city was now out of network, so Mario, who was hiding, didn't get any signal when he made a phone call. However, this couldn't stump everyone. Laura and the others who were hiding were using a drone to observe the situation in the campus. Although they accidentally failed to find the members of the archery team, they found Mario's figure. They informed Mario to gather in a certain classroom. Through the broadcast, taking advantage of the fact that most of the zombies were attracted by the broadcast sound, everyone quickly went to the target location to gather. However, on the way, they just happened to meet a zombie that wasn't attracted by the broadcast. The few of them originally planned to quietly bypass the zombie from behind, but things once again exceeded their expectations. One of the classmates accidentally knocked over the water cup of the companion in front. The clear collision sound immediately attracted the zombie's attention. Everyone immediately started running, and the zombie chased closely behind. John took the initiative to stay, and got into a hard fight with the zombie. Just then, Bob, who should have been eaten by the zombies, suddenly appeared for some reason, and solved this zombie with one knife. After saving John, Bob immediately questioned John about Mario's whereabouts. John didn't want to reveal the position of his friend. Bob immediately raised his watermelon knife and slashed at John. Although the other party was holding a weapon, John's strength was much stronger than Bob's. He still firmly had the upper hand. However, Bob had changed at this time and wasn't afraid of pain at all. Just when John was in crisis, the monitor Laura came back to help John, but was bitten by Bob because of this. Seeing his beloved goddess being bitten, John instantly burst out with great strength, and threw Bob out of the window. However, for an ordinary person, perhaps falling from a building would be a fatal injury, but for Bob now, it was simply nothing. He recovered as before in the blink of an eye. On the other side, John, with the injured Laura, finally met up with Mario and the others. Hearing that Laura was bitten by Bob, Mario's expression immediately changed greatly, because he was very sure that Bob had been infected by the zombie. However, John raised doubts about this, because Bob's condition wasn't as mindless as that of an ordinary zombie. The two of them were at an impasse. Finally, John insisted on keeping Laura, and said that if she really mutated, he would get rid of Laura at the first moment. The others could only let it go. At the same time, another zombie, Mary, who retained her sanity. At this time, her mind was filled with the desire for blood. She just happened to find several live fish in the duty room, grabbed them without hesitation and stuffed them into her mouth. There was another surviving teacher in the duty room at this time. After seeing Mary's behavior, he immediately planned to drive her away. Unexpectedly, he became Mary's delicious meal. As time went by, Laura began to show signs of turning into a zombie. and was filled with the desire for blood in her heart. Looking at John's attractive neck, after several hesitations, Laura finally endured it. As her sanity gradually returned, the zombie characteristics on Laura's body were also decreasing continuously. Finally, she looked no different from a normal person. She also became a special zombie like Bob and the others. As for the reason, it was still unknown. Everyone saw that Laura had really recovered. Although they still had some precautions, they finally allowed her to go with them. John took the initiative to stay by Laura's side, and took the opportunity to express his feelings. This was just a small episode in the zombie crisis. Everyone didn't forget the idea of escaping from here. After some simple thinking, several people built a simple obstacle in the classroom, prepared to use it to delay the zombies' actions, and buy time for everyone to escape. However, the development of things once again exceeded their expectations. There were too many zombies rushing in. They simply couldn't get away for a while. These few seconds were simply the longest time in everyone's life. Not long after, all the zombies in the corridor rushed into the classroom. Everyone immediately fled from the back door, and ran all the way to the rooftop. They were ready to wait here for the military rescue, but unexpectedly, it was actually locked here. In fact, someone had thought of this earlier. It was that person who locked the rooftop door. Not long after, a patrolling military team saw the students on the rooftop, and immediately rescued them. John and the others were still trapped in the building at this time, but that student who locked the door deliberately claimed that there was only himself here. The military team didn't think much, and only took him to escape. Mario and the others behind the door could only try their best to resist in the face of the countless zombies rushing in. The sound of the fight between the two sides attracted more zombies. Among them was the mutated Bob. Bob rushed straight towards Mario. In order to retaliate for him blinding his left eye, Bob planned to dig out Mario's left eyeball. Just at this critical moment, the monitor Laura took action in time. She was also a special mutated zombie, and wasn't afraid of Bob at all. However, the fight between them didn't last long, because another mutator, Mary, actually set the teaching building on fire at this time. She wanted to burn everyone inside to death. But unexpectedly, this actually helped John and the others, because once the fire alarm in the school was triggered, all the doors would be unlocked. The door of the rooftop was also opened because of this. John and the others immediately fled to the rooftop, and thus managed to get rid of the numerous zombies. Several people kept trying to call for help to the helicopter that was gradually flying away, but there was no effect. Although they were temporarily safe, they were completely trapped on the rooftop. At this time, they simply couldn't hold on for long. In comparison, Lily, who left the team, seemed to be in a completely different world. After leaving the team, she was immediately besieged by a large number of zombies. Finally, she survived by luck with the help of teacher Linda, and she was hidden in a certain safe room by the other party. What shocked her even more was that there were enough foods here for her to hold on for a long time. Later, Mario and the others also came here in order to look for supplies, but because Lily locked the door from the inside, everyone didn't get any supplies. Now John and the others were trapped on the rooftop. Lily heard that almost all the zombies outside were attracted by John and the others. She immediately took a lot of supplies and prepared to escape. But she hadn't walked far when she met the mutated Bob. At this time, the other party was already extremely hungry. He had no interest in those ordinary foods, and turned Lily into his delicious meal on the spot. This guy finally died in the mouth of the zombie. Bob, who had a good meal, was instantly full of strength. He actually climbed up the drain pipe and came to the rooftop. If it hadn't been for Evelyn's accidental discovery, I'm afraid everyone would have become Bob's delicious meal. Mario, who had been paying attention to Evelyn, immediately noticed the change here. After seeing Mario, Bob immediately put down Evelyn in his hand. He was blinded by hatred, and vowed to make Mario feel his pain. Evelyn still wanted to go and help, but she was thrown flying by the other party. Several other people also rushed over when they heard the news. However, at this time, Bob's strength increased greatly because he had eaten Lily. Even John was no longer his match. Now only Laura, who is also a mutator, can slightly block Bob. She inserted a wooden thorn into Bob's leg, but for a zombie, this is just a superficial wound. However, Bob was irritated by this and immediately set his target on Laura. With the suddenly increased strength in his body, even though Laura is also a mutator, she is no match for Bob at all. Just when Bob was about to kill Laura, he then realized that the other party was also a mutator. Bob didn't understand why the other party was stopping him. Laura didn't make any explanation, and just launched an attack on Bob again. John took the opportunity to step forward and strike again, but Bob was just caught off guard. He was still not someone that John could deal with. The next second, John was controlled by Bob. The glasses are about to be thrown down from the stairs. Laura quickly sneaked up on Bob from behind. In this way, Kuei-nan felt and kissed the earth for the second time. However, even if he fell from the 10th or more floor, Bob still remained unharmed. He stood up again after a few seconds. The mutator Mary also showed strong recovery ability. When she was crossing the road, she was hit by a passing car and flew more than 10 meters away. But she didn't even have a scratch, and the driver was the policeman Charles, who was in a hurry to go to the laboratory to look for George's research materials. Just when he was about to step forward to check on Mary, a row of dense bullets fell at his feet. Then a team of soldiers rushed out from the nearby jungle. They were clearing the zombies in the nearby area and looking for survivors. By the way, in this way, both of them were taken away by the military. Charles said that he had important information to give to the military. Thus, the military people knew the origin of this zombie crisis, and they knew that there were possible ways to solve the crisis stored in the school laboratory. The military immediately sent a special operations team to Shashan Middle School to look for George's computer, and met John and the others who were trapped on the rooftop. Although these people weren't part of the mission, the team leaders still requested to the superior to rescue these students. Originally, the military high command also planned to agree to this matter, but just then, an accident in the shelter made the military decide not to accept survivors anymore. Through the monitoring, it was found that Mary, who had woken up, was madly gnawing on the surrounding survivors. It took many soldiers working together to control her. The military was worried that there were also hidden zombie viruses among the other survivors, so such an order was issued. The students who were about to escape were sent back to the rooftop again, and were closely watched by the military. The team leader fired a warning shot to tell them not to act rashly. Then the members of the special operations team rushed into the teaching building and found George's research computer. Then they left John and the others behind and evacuated quickly. Looking at the military people leaving them behind like this, John and the others' hearts completely sank to the bottom. However, they didn't give up like this. Since the military didn't save them, then everyone would save themselves. Not long after, it rained heavily in the sky and there was also thunder. The huge sound attracted those zombies. John and the others took the opportunity to secretly leave the rooftop and come downstairs. Just then, Mario suddenly froze because he saw his mother among the zombies. It turned out that after the zombie crisis broke out, his mother came to the school to look for her son. Because she was worried about Mario's safety, she accidentally saw Mario's friend Harry. His mother planned to ask him about her son's whereabouts. However, Harry had been framed by Lily and turned into a zombie. Mario's mother was also killed because of this. Soon everyone also found the zombies over there. They didn't know the woman's identity. One of the companions saw that there was only one zombie. He immediately rushed up and prepared to deal with that zombie, but he was stopped by Mario. Only then did everyone know that zombie was actually Mario's mother. So everyone stopped attacking that zombie. Instead, they took Mario and quickly fled from here. After all, because of the previous fight, many zombies were coming towards here, but due to the heavy rain, the road surface was very muddy and slippery. Some classmates still, unfortunately, fell behind. Among them, the lucky ones just happened to meet other escaping teams, such as several members of the archery team. They could still survive by luck. As for the unlucky ones, they could only become the food of the zombies. Mario and the others finally managed to escape from the teaching building area, preparing to enter the basketball gym to take shelter. But for some reason, Laura suddenly stopped at the entrance and told everyone to escape quickly. Unexpectedly, there were also all zombies here. The previous lightning also made the zombies discover Laura and the others. John and the others fled into the equipment room of the basketball gym and temporarily got rid of those zombies. However, this was obviously not a long-term solution. After some simple thinking, John thought of a way. They pushed those carts storing sports supplies and rushed into the group of zombies. Then they connected the carts end to end to form a fence to block the zombies' attacks. According to John's plan, they used this fence to slowly approach the exit of the basketball gym, then they could escape from here. However, there were too many zombies, and they almost broke through the fence formed by the carts. Finally, it was Laura who, relying on her identity as a mutator, wasn't afraid of the zombies scratching, and forcefully blocked the gap. This temporarily solved the crisis. Then they encountered the second problem. The exit they were leaving from now was the back door of the basketball gym. It was actually locked here. It was definitely not realistic to go back to the front door now, so they could only use their bodies to break open this locked door. However, no matter how hard they hit, they couldn't shake this locked door. Just when they were about to despair, the door actually opened by itself. For some reason, Evelyn's father actually appeared here. It was he who opened the door. Later, they learned that he was just as worried about his child as Mario's mother. That's why he appeared at the school. Everyone successfully escaped from the basketball gym. However, the crisis wasn't lifted yet. The outside was still a world of zombies. It didn't take long for everyone to be surrounded by zombies again. Just then, Evelyn's father chose to sacrifice himself. He attracted the zombies' attention with a flare and a whistle, and bought time for the children to escape. This was the last thing he could do for everyone. Evelyn then found that her father had been infected by the zombie at some point. Evelyn endured the grief in her heart, and reluctantly separated from her father. In this way, John and the others finally escaped from the school. However, the outside world had already been occupied by zombies at this time. They fled all the way and came to a certain construction site, and were ready to take a temporary rest here. However, just then, because Laura hadn't eaten for a long time, the desire for blood in her heart surged. She actually showed the symptoms of turning into a zombie again. She didn't want to hurt her companions, and could only keep biting herself to relieve it. John noticed Laura's symptoms at the first time, but had no way to deal with it. Just then, the military suddenly used a helicopter to broadcast to the whole city. Everyone was extremely surprised by the content, because the military was going to completely destroy this place with missiles in 30 minutes. John and the others had to find an air raid shelter to hide in as soon as possible. And the reason why the military made such a crazy move, it was completely because after they studied George's data materials, they found that there was no way at all to crack this mysterious zombie virus. After all, George didn't even know where this thing came from, and according to the current situation, it was inferred if these zombies couldn't be contained, they would break through the military's blockade line and spread to other surrounding cities soon. So the military decided to directly destroy Shashan City. John and the others were just about to escape from here, but they didn't expect that Bob actually chased after them again. His target was very clear, which was Mario among the crowd. Mario was bitten by Bob before he could react. Only then did Laura and the others react. However, before they could take action, Bob actually fell to the ground in pain. Then Laura also showed the same symptoms. It turned out that the military, in order to better eliminate the zombies, sent out a large number of drones to create noise, to attract the zombies to gather in a certain wide area. Laura and the others also had the hearing ability of zombies, so they were affected by that huge noise, and felt extremely painful. Everyone seized the opportunity, and threw Bob down from the building again. This time, the steel bars penetrated Bob's body, but he was still alive tenaciously. Mario knew that he surely wouldn't live long after being bitten by Bob, so he decided to sacrifice himself. Mario bid farewell to his companions. He planned to use his last bit of sanity to lure the nearby zombies away for everyone. After Evelyn and the others left, Mario waited alone in the building for the mutation, but he found that Bob actually appeared in front of him. The other party knew that Mario would become one of the zombies soon, so he seized the last opportunity to make Mario feel his pain. This time, without the interference of others, Mario was no match for Bob at all. After a while, Mario lost his left eye forever. Just then, the military also launched its final action. A lot of zombies were attracted by the noise of the drones. With the general's order, the whole Shashan city turned into a sea of fire. The general naturally knew that countless survivors would die because of his decision, so the general then recorded a confession video and committed suicide to atone for his sins. John and the others naturally escaped the disaster luckily. However, at this time, Laura was increasingly unable to control herself, so she secretly left the team when everyone wasn't paying attention. John and the others searched for her but didn't find Laura's trace. Instead, they met the military team, then they were taken to the shelter as survivors. Not long after, the military launched the second wave of cleansing to eliminate those scattered zombies. However, the military didn't eliminate all of them. At least they took away the original pathogen, that is, George's son. Obviously, the South Korean government had other ideas. A few months later, John and the others finally left the shelter. At this point, the city of Hyosin had completely turned into ruins. However, in the next moment, Evelyn discovered strange flickering lights where the school used to be. Evelyn couldn't help but speculate that perhaps Mario and the others weren't dead. When she shared this news with John and the others, everyone decided to take advantage of the night to check the school ruins. As they delved deeper, they actually saw an unextinguished campfire on the rooftop. It was clear that someone had indeed been here. Just then, a figure slowly approached from behind. It turned out to be the missing Laura. Everyone hoped she could return with them to start a new life. Laura, however, decisively declined and left behind a cryptic statement.
여기 할 일이 좀 남았어.
Then she looked into the distance, and didn't give the others a chance to persuade her to stay. She jumped off the rooftop. The film ends here. The first season of All of Us Are Dead was released in 2022. It was adapted from the comic Now at Our School. The adaptation of the film is quite significant, and many details of the settings have been deleted. For example, the reason why Laura and the others don't lose their minds. In addition, the film has forced plot elements that dumb down the intelligence of characters. As a result, the reputation of this film is highly polarized. As for what it's really like, everyone already has the answer in their hearts. Well, that's all for today's video. Thank you all for watching. Your likes, comments, and follows are the greatest encouragement to us. See you in the next video.